Hi guys, I'm finally back. I've been taking such a long time to come back with book talk, but I have been reading books. I just haven't found like the convenient time to record. And I used to record in the morning when Aurora's in school in the morning time, but now I'm doing like I'm doubling down on my meditation and things like that. So, and then I still want to keep working out, so I'm like finding it really hard. And then the podcast and then the readings. Okay, yeah, I'm all over the place. But I'm still reading and I have to record before I forget because I jump from one book to the other right away. So here I am. I did not do more videos for the custodians, Dolores Cannon, because I did read up. I didn't finish the book. I did read up on a few more chapters and I wrote some notes, but I didn't finish the book. And then I was so motivated to go read these other books that I was like, oh my God, it was just, when something else really calls your attention. So I couldn't put myself to finish the Dolores book now because there were the other books that really wanted my attention. So I'm here to talk about one of those and I'm very excited about. Okay, so this book is called Secret Journey to Planet Serpo. So this book, the reason why I didn't specifically like look into the author or the book. I was literally really, really intrigued with what I knew was called Project Serpo. And Project Serpo, I learned when I watched the Gaia Cosmic Disclosure. And there's these episodes where you have Richard Doty, who is one of the whistleblowers that comes on the show. And he was speaking about a project that he called Project Serpo. And then I heard about it and I said, oh, is this true? Like, what is like, I was just like, what? If this is true, this is insane. Like how well, like it was like something that happened and we never found out. I was just so intrigued by it. And I was Googling one day. I wanted to find out more. I mean, this is like years later, I was Googling it because I think I watched those episodes like 2 years ago, maybe. And then I was still thinking, my brain was still thinking about it. And so I Googled it and then I came across this book. And right away I'm like, okay, I have to read this book. And I loved it. I loved the book. You have to really be into, like, side note for anyone who's thinking about possibly going to get the book and spending the time to read it. You have to be like really comfortable or okay with reading like military stuff related stuff and hidden projects and things like that, because they talk about like the MJ-12, they talk about the presidents that came in and out during that project. They talked about like, those things that they have to explain for you to understand why it was not fully shared with the public, right? And who was not sharing it, who, like, what parties were not sharing it, right? So I don't want to give any what's it called? Like, I don't want to like spoilers. I don't want to give too many spoilers. I'm going to try to do that, but I'm going to still try to talk about the book as usual, because I want to give space for people to be able to still read it for themselves. The project in itself, apparently it went, this is interesting to me. I don't know how to put it in words. Like, what I thought was so interesting was that there's a lot of people that believe that Spielberg, for example, and the book talks about this, there's a lot of people that believe that Spielberg had some sort of information, like an insider that was giving him information, because he did a whole movie that literally seems to kind of show parts of this. And what was the name of the movie of Spielberg? Contact of the Third Kind. Well, I'm going to put the picture or the cover of the movie here so you guys can find it. I haven't watched that movie, but the cool thing about this book is this book gives you, towards the end, it gives you a comparative between the supposed actual events of what went down, which I'm going to get into now, and the movie, the Spielberg movie, and what seems to pair up. And it does seem like he was right on with a lot of stuff. It's like, did he know something? Was it part of a disclosure that like they wanted to like comfortably release so people kind of were okay with it when it came to like the truth coming out? I don't know. You just don't know. That's something that there's no conclusion to that, right? But what's understood is that there was a project and it all initiated with a crash. The whole thing started with a crash. There was a crash where there was 2 Ebens from planet Serpo, 2 Ebens that are like the Greys, or like a family of the Greys, I guess you could say. They're like the Greys in a way. And these Ebens, one of them died and one of them survived and literally was working with, I guess, I don't know, working, but like they were staying with the military in the US and being debriefed, and the government was getting information from them. Again, you have to remember that there's all this compartmentalizing, right? Supposedly, so that not everyone knows everything and things stay in little neat boxes and secrecy can stay that way, or projects don't have to be interrupted in that form, I guess. They'll have their reasons. Some are good, some are right, some are bad, whatever. But so that means that a lot of people that might be working in that facility or around that facility don't even know that that's going on in that facility. And that is the case for this as well, like many other situations. And so there was an Eben there in one of the facilities, and that Eben apparently was, they were learning to communicate with the Eben. There was learning of the language, and Eben kind of trying to learn the English language, and back and forth information, trying to get information from the being. What they ended up finding was an apparatus that they couldn't get to work. It was like a communication device. They couldn't get it to work for a really long time, but apparently it has to be paired up with the craft that they came in for it to like be, I guess, powered, or for it to like activate and work. Once that was figured out, they began the process of communicating with their planet, the Eben planet, with the Serpos, for planet Serpos, or the Ebens. And that just began this whole thing, this plan where they called it the exchange program. So think of it like, you know how people, when they're like young, they'll do an exchange program where like, what if the family members goes to Germany and the German family sends their kid to the US and there's a switch. It's like an exchange program, right? This is the same. The exchange program was, send us one of your guys and we'll send you up some of our guys, and they'll spend years in other countries, planets, on other planets, and gather whatever's, I guess you could say, intelligence, information, technology, whatever they could learn. The idea was to learn, right? And bring it back to the planet that was convenient for the population at some point. I don't know how convenient it was because we never found out about it. It was never really fully disclosed. And on top of that, it's almost like there probably was technology gained from that, but how much of it would we get to see, right? What my biggest take was, I was reading this book and I didn't expect to take this from this book, because I was going into it because I was very, very interested in the project. But I didn't go into it thinking I was going to learn like some really important stuff about humanity, which I ended up coming to the conclusion, but I'll get to that. The reason why I got to these conclusions was because there's a diary written by one of the individuals that did end up going in the exchange program. So supposedly there was 12 individuals that ended up going to planet Serpos, and they stayed there. If I'm not mistaken, now I would have to look at the number, but I think it was 13 years. Something like that. It was a bit confusion towards the end. Like they explain how like the year for them is different from the year from here, and the individuals that went to Serpos started getting confused with what year was it in on Earth, and like what year really was it for Earth, because over there's solar system functions with different days a year. And so there was some confusion about that, and the agreed upon time ended up extending. So 13 years, maybe 15 years. I can't remember now. I didn't write down that detail down. I'm literally talking off the top of my head after finished reading it, and I forgot to take notes. But it was so interesting, like to read the supposed. Again, I'm saying supposed because it supposedly is. We don't know. The supposed diary of the commander. So the commander of the American people that went there, right? And they did this whole selection process for who's going to go there. So it had to be individuals that didn't have kids, that didn't have like really, really close ties with their families. If they were orphans, even better. If like when they were young, they were orphaned, it was even better because there's no connections for them to have to keep up. They can just leave and disappear. And the whole book goes into this process of what the government does when these individuals come back, to make them disappear, like their identity disappears. They call it sheep dipping. Apparently the book explains this whole thing, right? And so these individuals were picked upon, obviously their personal profile in that sense, but also researchers, scientists, doctors, like they were looking for all those specialties to send out because they're supposed to gather information, but also they had to take care of each other in a way, right? And there was 2 attempts for them to leave. The first one apparently didn't go through. The first one didn't go through because the Ebens just wanted to pick up the Eben that was communicating down here that had survived actually ended up passing away. So they wanted to come pick up the bodies of the passed away Ebens. They wanted to take it back to their planet, and they were going to be back after. So I think it was like a year later they came back, and literally they were shipped off with a bunch of stuff from trucks. Like apparently it was tons in weight of the amount of stuff that the individuals took with them to Serpos. And you read the diary, like if you get the book and you read it, it's so interesting to read the diary of how the travel was. Apparently there's a wormhole used, because if not, they would be traveling forever. So there's a wormhole apparently that's being used for them to travel through, like bending time, I guess, right? So they can get there quicker and not spend all these years getting there. It ended up being, I believe it was 9 months for them to get there. And it was just this really crazy scenario that they were painting in the commander's diary of like, they were constantly getting sick and they had to stay in some sort of like holding space or like bubble holding space. I guess it kept them from getting too sick. It seems like one of them didn't make it and died on the journey. They were talking about feeling really dizzy, losing consciousness. They would just lose consciousness and be like, wait, what day is it? They would wake up 3 days later or something. They wouldn't even understand like what's going on. So I guess the human body really, these individual, or I don't call it people, aliens, these aliens, apparently their bodies, I guess, are adapted to, used to this travel, but the human body obviously is not there yet. So they were put in special areas to help them sustain that. It still seems a bit rough for them. So you get to read about all that in the diary. But the fascinating part is you get to read when they arrive and how the whole like area looked, the city, what it looked like, the town, what it looked like. And the funny thing is, at one point the commander talks about how when they're going to eat, there's this like communal, like cafeteria like area where everyone is eating there. So it doesn't seem like people are going and making the dinner at their house and eating there, but everyone's going to this communal cafeteria and eating there. And they said that the food didn't have taste, so they were like not very happy with that. They had some stuff that they had brought on their own, but they had to adapt eventually to the food that there and like find a way to spice it up. But in that communal cafeteria, they're seeing other races aside from the Ebens. So apparently there's, I don't know if you want to call it like other exchanges, but because we don't know what's the dealing is, but it seems to be that there's other beings interacting with the Ebens as well, working together and things like that. So it's like, we're the only ones. It's like, are we the only ones that are not interacting with other beings? Like, I mean, the civilians, right? We know that most of us are aware from like the whistleblowers that the governments have been doing it for like since the 50s. In this case, you see it here. So apparently they came back from this exchange program. They arrived back, I think it was in 1977. So you can see how long the governments have probably been interacting with these different races and going out there. And so I really recommend the book if you're into military information, if you're really into like going into that whole secrecy thing. And I also recommend it if you're just like, let me read the commander's like diary, see what he said about the whole thing. And then you hear about how the Ebens are, and this is my take, those years that they spend that I read from the commander's, diary, those years they spend, you constantly realize that they're it's like not clones of each other, but it's like there's no individuality. It's like there's no uniqueness in them. It's like they all follow the rules. I guess there's rules. They all follow the rules. They all have a task and they follow through and they do it the time they need to do it. And, they have their own process of time, like how to function with time. Some sort of a tower, and the marking kind of marks on, I think on the floor it was like marks like what they should be doing. Like, for example, 9 a.m. got to be at work. Oh, 12 o'clock, let me have lunch, kind of thing. Like that's what I imagined when I was reading it. And what you realize is that they don't seem to have that uniqueness. And the commander was saying that, like, they, they're just kind of neutral most of the time. There's a police supposedly there, but they were barely ever needed or used in the years that they were there, only with them actually, because they got angry about certain situations that had to do with like a dead body of one of the team members, and what the Ebens were going to do with the body. And there was a bit of a like confrontation with that, and that's when the police showed up, like, oh, what's going on here. But if not, it's like out of sight, out of mind. Like, the police is not needed, everyone follows the rules. They were talking about like lack of music and like that creative stuff, right? And that's when I was reading the book and I said, wow, like my biggest take on this whole thing was, I never realized how important it was that you permit a civilization, a population, a race to have the right to be unique, to have the right to be independent, because that also brings advancements in itself. Because what the commander was saying is, they did have quite a bit of convenient technology that humans might have not had at the time, but at the same time they could have progressed way more, because the lack of looking outside or thinking outside the box, or the lack of unique or different sort of thinking, it seems like that also played against them as a race to advance, because other races seem to have much more in line with more advanced technology. And so I thought that was so interesting, how unique humans are in that way, because we always hear about how humans are looked upon from outside. The other races, we're looked upon as like special, and we're looked upon as like a really interesting project. This avatar body is an interesting project that we're supposedly developing and we're working with. And when you read these kinds of books, even though you're reading it, in my case, for another perspective or another storyline, you end up realizing, the more I read about these races, the more I end up realizing how unique the human being is, and actually how we're in a position to really do amazing things. But the thing is, we're so kind of busy with our 9 to 5s and our work, and because maybe people have kids and they have to go to school, and then all these social things that you have to do. Like, we're so busy that we actually don't have time to develop even further our uniqueness and our talents and our abilities and our capabilities and all these things. So I think that when I read this book, I said to myself, like, wow, I'm going to start like really, I know that the Akashic Records always told me like how important creativity was, because creativity actually brings intuition. And now I'm realizing that these beings they don't have any they didn't seem to have any creativity. And maybe they have some intuition, but we have the ability to utilize creativity in our life to further our development, spiritually, connecting wise, channeling wise, intuitive wise, like, and also to advance the race in itself, right? So that was my biggest take on the whole book, after reading all the commander's notes and observations of that race. And I said, wow, that's super interesting. And also, I always felt like the human condition was always so limited because of the structure that we live in, and the way things are calculated and controlled and things like that. And I always felt like we were so limited. But after reading that book, I said, well, yes, we have I'm not going to deny that we have those limitations, but I'm realizing that there's a lot of other races that have it as well, just in different ways, possibly, or in some even worse than us. The good thing is we are in a process of the possible liberation of humanity, depending on how everybody's free will and how everybody reacts. We'll see how that goes. And that's where we are right now. And that's the interesting thing. And that's where I think it's so important for us to read more about this stuff, to understand more other races, to understand what kind of life they live, to understand being it true, not being it true. It's still an opener of like, maybe people read it and say, no, I don't think this is true at all. At least allow yourself to open your brain, your mind, and be like, well, if it is true, like what can I take from this? What can I learn from this? So I loved this book. I read it in a week, like literally, like I found it and I was like, okay, gotta get it, got it for an ebook. And then I read it in a week. And it was a rainy weekend after I'd got it. There was a rainy weekend here in Holland. And I was like, okay, doubling down on my book. I was very excited. And I just, like, I ate that book up. I loved it. I was a little kind of like getting bored a little bit of the details of the government part, but it's important to understand like how it's hidden and how it was functioned and what teams worked with it. You hear a lot about like the MJ12 and things like that. So imagine, like, let's say that this is, I want to believe it's true. Like, imagine if this was true. There's like a discussion between whether 3 people that went to Project Serpos or whether 12. But let's say the 12 did go. 12 individuals went, and they went all the way there to the Serpos planet and Zeta Reticuli area, right? And they had that experience. Just like, and we knew nothing about it. Well, I wasn't born yet, but still, like, no one knew nothing about it. Apparently, it was discussed and kind of not debriefed, but like shared. You'll hear all this. If you read the book, you're going to hear all this in the book, or read this on the book, where it's like, you can, if a project, it cannot be disclosed, like cannot be shared, they have 25 years till they can share it. So the individual who came out to talk about it, who's anonymous, they call themselves anonymous, not the anonymous we know, but another anonymous. And there's like a whole website with the documents and things. So the book shares that as well. But apparently, if 25 years pass, then they can talk about it. So what it seems like is this individual shared it literally the day that was 25 years. So they were literally waiting to share this. So I think that's why we're also getting more disclosure information, because all these projects that happened, in my case, before I was born, now are able to be shared because that time frame has passed by. And imagine the ones we don't know about. Imagine the ones that have not been disclosed yet. So I love finding out about this stuff. I love reading about this stuff. And I hope you guys enjoyed me talking about it. And let me know, like, comment below and let me know if you guys got the book, if you guys read the book, like, how did it make you feel? What did you take? Because what I took was, the most important point for me was like the creativity and how I was like, oh my God, being unique is awesome. Like, and also the other thing I took was, not only is being unique awesome, and that we really need to honor that, we shouldn't all try to be the same and like try to like be like, oh, I'm gonna oblige to everything because I want to do the right thing, and because then we're all being the same. We all need to just honor ourselves and what we feel, and but at the same time respect the other person, because how are we going to share with each other, dude, I found out doing this is gonna do this for you, and I know I was really looking into this over here and I created this new apparatus and I think it's going to be cool for, like, how are we going to share things with each other if we can't seem to find a midpoint to understand each other? So I think the idea is that we're supposed to all be unique and have different perspectives and ways of thinking, because we're supposed to bring all that together to make a better race, a better population, and advance and push ourselves past that boundary, that limitation that I guess the Ebens got to a specific place. I don't know where they are now, of course, but they got to a specific place and they couldn't push past that because there's no one trying to resolve in a unique way their problems. It's just like the people up here making the decisions, everyone else is following the guidelines, and that's about it. No one seemed depressed or unhappy, but it was just like everyone just was. So we also are known for having very complex emotional bodies. It seems like everyone in the solar system knows about our complex emotional bodies. We also are very aware of our own complex emotional bodies. So we also have that going on. I think that's part of us having to also bring in more creativity. I think it was given to us on purpose. We have to learn how to manage them better and handle them better so that it doesn't deter us from our greater good, but we're supposed to use it to our advantage to create, to project out. And also we're supposed to be co-creators with the creator. And how are you going to co-create? For us, we're supposed to use our emotions and our drive and our passion. So just remember that, like, for your day-to-day life, bring that into your daily life as the emotional part in a good way, so you can project out and create what it is that you really want, whatever it is. It doesn't matter. Bye, guys.